My name is Ginny, also known as 2/3 Lotus, everywhere on the internet. This clip is part of my series, The Poets of Twitch, where I analyze my viewers' writing live on stream. Nothing has been edited out, so you're seeing this exactly as streamed with all of the imperfections and tangents that come with being live. If you want to catch me live or want more information, check out the description. Otherwise, enjoy some excellent writing. The questions. Are you okay with my critique? In addition to just analysis, are you okay with this going on the YouTube playlist? And are you okay with chat giving you feedback? Of course. Bro likes Russian literature and poetry. Hi, easy follow. Yeah, it's pretty simple, right? But also I love like South and Central American literature. One of my favorite books is 100 Years of Solitude, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and there's some beautiful stuff out of there. Many Americans who I like. I don't know, it's everything. I like reading. How many poems can I submit? You have quite a stash. Try not to have like more than one like waiting in the queue because they'll get lost. But definitely if you stick around for a while, you can keep submitting. This is probably like the 4th or 5th Drowning Devil poem I've read on stream, so there's no limit. Of course, I tend to prioritize new people, so like, I had already sort of started setting up Drowning Devils, but like, so yours will be a priority. And one thing to note is that I never look at someone's poem if they are not here on stream with me, because I always want to give people the option to say, hey, can we stop looking at my poem right now? I don't, maybe it's an uncomfortable poem and they're like, okay, let's stop. I actually want to tap out here. Like, that's very important to me. It's important that my analysis is safe and people feel safe with such vulnerable work and sharing it with me, right? My handwriting is on point. I too write cursive. Yeah, and I also do calligraphy sometimes on Twitch, so that's a thing. If you look at my about page, those images for like those links are all things that I've drawn myself, and I'm working on a few more. So, big fan of handwriting and decorative script and all that stuff. So, yeah. I don't do calligraphy. I just had one too many cursive writing books knocked around my head as a kid. Fair enough. Oh, I have a poem I need to read out loud and send you, of course. Send to you, of course, half of why I like it is how I imagine it read. Yeah. You can submit poetry in any format, and you can read it, then I can read it, we can talk about how the poem is read, all those things, so feel free to submit that for sure. Let's jump into His Love Was Made for Others, though, because we've been dawdling, admittedly, and I want to talk poetry. So, Jeffrey, the first thing that we do is we tend to just do like 2 reads of the poem, maybe more, without the pen. I feel very strongly, I tell people, you need to enjoy the poem as art and really just soak it in and listen to it. So that's what I do first, and then we jump into analysis if there's like difficult things that need to be picked apart, or if it's pretty straightforward, we can go into critique or teaching a lesson through the poem, and they tend to look pretty artistic by the end of it. I got an A in high school English literature. Rubbing my hands, let's do this. Awesome. I didn't like English in high school, and I started liking English in college, and then I dropped out. So here we are. His Love Was Made for Others by drowningdevil12. I'm not religious, but I can feel the weight of my sins. I don't believe in a God, but I can feel his eye on me every time I do something wrong. I feel his judgment, his clouded gaze. I feel the need to break, to rebel, to light fire, to skin, but it will do nothing to him in the end. He is a God. And I am merely a husk of what was. I tear up grass in the front lawn under his unseeing stare. I am the unwanted child, left to do as they please, but with no guide. All I do is disappoint. People want for more. They expect more, but I was given no manual. How could they expect so much of me? Am I in the wrong for simply wanting to be? His love was made for others by drowningdevil12. I like it. Immediate thoughts. Something that popped into my head while reading, like halfway in, was the prodigal son. If we're talking about the Christian God, and you say his eye, and I know you've sort of hinted at Christian ideas in past poems, but that's just something that came into my head. That's a story from Le Bible, which I know better than most trans people. And I like it. Good imagery with the grass. I'm gonna read it again though, for enjoyment, to soak it in and listen. So, his love was made for others by drowningdevil12. I'm not religious, but I can feel the weight of my sins. I don't believe in a God, but I can feel his eye on me. Every time I do something wrong, I feel his judgment. His clouded gaze, I feel the need to break, to rebel, to light fire, to skin, but it will do nothing to him in the end. He is a God. And I am merely a husk of what was. I tear up grass in the front lawn under his unseeing stare. I am the unwanted child left to do as they please, but with no guide. All I do is disappoint. People want for more, they expect more, but I was given no manual. How could they expect so much of me? For simply... am I in the wrong for simply wanting to be? His love was made for others. Cool title. Always a fan of the title that is not appearing throughout the rest of the poem. That's something that I particularly enjoy doing a lot of the time, so I'm a fan. I have to say, so this first two lines, I'm not religious, but I can feel the weight of my sins, is something that really, slapped me in the face. If we're talking things that stick out, which is my purple color, it hit me and I'm like, oh, this poem, I relate, right? I don't believe in a God, and we'll go through and talk about the a God, his thing, because there definitely feels to be a pointing toward the Christian God. I think anytime you talk about God as him, we're talking Christian, which definitely also gives us some opportunity to expand and use some references to Christianity if we want to, based on this, right? I'm a big fan of just overt Christian references in my poems, and it's an idea. Every time I do something, I feel his judgment. Do something wrong. I feel his judgment, his clouded gaze. I feel the need to break, to rebel. Thy fire to skin, but it will do nothing to him in the end. He is a god. And I'm merely a husk of a was. I tear up grass in the front lawn. I do like this. Interesting. When religious people write God, they write it with the capital. So writing God with lowercase is really indicative. Yes! Great observation, Jeffrey. We were actually talking about this yesterday in another poem. But yes, if we are talking about the Christian God, which it feels like Christians write his, and Christians write God. This isn't any religious person about gods, but it is specifically an Abrahamic convention. Maybe, I don't know about Islam. I know about Judaism and Christianity do this. So yeah, lowercasing it is implying that straight, they do too. Okay. Perfect. And, and he, so yeah, lowercase his is just very clear. It's a signal, right? And I think you are probably aware of that. I think most people living around Christianity are familiar with the idea of like the capital G God, right? So, under his unseeing stare, I'm the unwanted child, left to do as they please, but with no guide. So this is where I thought like, oh, this actually reminds me of the biblical story of the prodigal son, which is slightly different. You have this child that like two kids are given money by their dad, and then one basically goes and spends it on hookers and alcohol, like Charles Bukowski, and then the other, like, you know, buys a farm or something and actually does something with it. Or maybe he stays home and works on the family farm or something, right? And so the idea of like the unwanted child doing as they please with no guide, it's a connection that you might investigate, but no no pressure on that. I'm personally, when talking about religion, I personally enjoy those overt references, but that's just my taste. All I do is disappoint. People want for more. They expect more, but I was given no manual. How could they expect so much of me? Am I in the wrong for simply wanting to be? And this gives me echoes, I would say, of course, from you, Drowning Devil, of transness, right? Because am I in the wrong for wanting to be? Religion, again, specifically Christianity, says it is wrong to be trans, right? I mean, interpretation of the Bible, you can change it. I would argue that the Bible's accepting of all, but damn, it seems to seep into everything. It does, and that might not have been intentional, and this doesn't necessarily overtly speak to being trans, right? But because am I in the wrong for simply wanting to be, again, this could be interpreted also as just like being left alone, you know, let me be, stop looking, stop with your unseeing stare, feel the eyes on me, the judgment. And I think this is maybe like the biggest thing throughout your poem is that it's visual, right? We talk about the five senses, and I think I know it's clear, you are mostly here using visual metaphor and that kind of stuff. His eye on me, judgment, gaze, and then I feel the need to break. I presume this to me says break his gaze, get him to again stop seeing me. And we do have some like feel here with fire and skin, but again, under his unseeing stare. And I particularly like this tearing up grass in the front lawn. I guess what I conceptualize here is, I mean, it could be literally like grabbing and tearing and pulling it out, but also just like grabbing, clutching it so hard that you're like ripping the grass out of the lawn, in like, pain below this great presence. And this, of course, functions really well because it's specifically outdoors. So you can be under the sky being his unseeing stare, and this really adds to the idea of like the omnipresence, right? If God watches from the sky, he can kind of always see you, right? I am the unwanted child, left to do as they please but with no guide. All I do is disappoint. People want for more, they expect more. And here's a interesting line. Maybe we'll get into this after the first ad break. But people want for more, they expect more. So only, 80% of the way into the poem, you bring in the idea of other people. Of course, his love was made for others. You have it at the beginning, so it's not like we don't expect other people to come in. But I also wonder, you say, all I do is disappoint. People want for more, they expect more, right? This shows that people are almost like God in this poem, right? And I'll do lowercase g since you do it lowercase. That people are functioning in the same way as God, right? Being that he loves them. And I wonder maybe if there is a way that you could lean into also the idea that rather than these people just being echoes of God and the judgment that you feel, I wonder if you can lean in to God loving them and God's love working for them, and that these people feel comfort, maybe under a sky that is always watching, underneath a gaze of judgment. Some people can feel comfort. Christians talk about being God-fearing as a good thing, right? But of course, you don't find this to be a good thing, so there's the tension. But you don't really dig into the idea of others' relation to God's love so much as you just mention them as being like God. Which does imply, in some sense, that they appreciate this love, but maybe that's something that I would look into more, given like a first pass of this. So there's like my first pass, just getting through the whole thing. And then I'm going to stand up and stretch and drink some water and rest my voice because I just started streaming. And I'm going to run this ad break. I implore you all to not watch the ads. Stand up, stretch, take care of yourself. Self-care ad break. Don't go on TikTok, and unless it's mine. And I'll be right back. Ads, don't watch them. Okay. Hi, Harper. Hey, buddy. You don't get ads in Jordan? It just like, that's wild. You live in Jordan. How are you? How are you? I know there's, in some places in Jordan, like, bombs are falling from the sky, right? So, I hope you are well. That sounds like a tough time. I'm good, Lamau. The bombs don't fall on Jordan, really. They just pass overhead. The ones that fall are deactivated. Okay. Okay. That's, mildly reassuring, right? And I'm glad that you are well, right? Mildly reassuring? Well, you know, like, oh, there's bombs in the sky, but at least they're not falling on us. And at least if one falls, right, it's not, like, gonna land on my house. That seems helpful. I should turn off this ring light. Ring light is not good to be on with the iPad. Exactly. It's good to make humor of these things too. I always find humor to be... Why are we talking about bombs? Because Jeffrey lives in Jordan, and that means bombs fly around in the sky. Good times. Oh, Jesus. Jesus, that's like this poem. Alright, so I want to talk about maybe writing. I mean, we're talking about writing. That's always the case. But I wonder if we can look at... I guess first, Drowning Devil, before I try to find something to teach through this poem, something to dig into, do you have any questions about the poem? Anything that you want to dig into more, right? Because that is a good thing, right? To listen to you and try to dig into what you want. Otherwise, I'll keep giving this some care and attention and suss out something I can talk about. Y'all are so not helpful. So, yeah, let's talk about the title. So, his love was made for others. And like I said, so titles we've talked about before. In my opinion, there's a few ways that we can do titles and use them as tools in poetry. The title can sort of introduce the poem and introduce it, right? Be a sort of precursor to the poem, almost like a glorified or more attention brought to first line. Or it can sort of relate to the whole poem. That's one way to title it. If the title relates to the entire poem, then yay, right? It's a suitable title. It can also add new context. And I think right now, your title falls into the category of adding new context. And to be clear, no one of these is better than the other, right? The only thing is sometimes you add new context to your poem and you say, I'm gonna tell you about, like, because, and by this I mean, his love was made for others. You don't, again, really talk about how others relate to his love in your poem. Pretty straightforward. And adding context is great because it gives your reader more to think about. However, sometimes you add context and your reader says, wait, I want to know more about that part. I want more of this. And that's my own, like, personal preference reading this poem, is I think this title has a really dramatic sort of dynamic. of this omnipresent love, which is not a love for me, and this omnipresent love which many others can appreciate and enjoy and find comfort in. And I think that is a great point of contrast, because I sort of feel like maybe that this poem doesn't have many turns, it doesn't have much tension and contrast within it. Generally, you talk about, I'm not religious, but I sort of still feel God looming in my life, maybe societally, the expectations, the judgment. And then you do want to get away from it, you say that, and if anything, this does have like a little more tension. And then, you talk about expectation again, and how, you want to be away from this, right? But it does feel kind of maybe flat overall. I wonder if this poem was do good if I extended it to provide more detail about other people. Maybe. And you also don't necessarily need to extend it. You could throw in, tweak some of these lines. I think one more line could give context about the way that people feel this, right? Or even you could say, I tear up grass in the front lawn of the church, right? Then it shows the contrast. I am suffering, juxtaposed with, inside, I know, maybe under his unseeing stare, as those inside something. There's a cool thing there with them being inside and worshiping and you being outside actually experiencing it. Maybe that's like a way you can include it. And that would be like adding 2 lines. I wouldn't really call that like extending the poem that much, right? And people want more, they expect more. You could talk about how this is them being that reflection of God. You could add just a little bit, right? And I was given no manual. I think often religious people will talk about like a holy text as something that guides them. And, this is probably what you are referencing already, but you could talk about these people and their book and their guide, right? Their guide and their God. These are 2 things that are sort of interchangeable words in this sense. Other people have this guide, this book. And I don't have a manual, I don't have a book, I'm left here alone. And it creates this really interesting dichotomy, because when your choices are accept God, which is everything within this context, right? This is God. Everything, the entire universe, the love of an infinite love, an unconditional love. If you deny this, there's sort of this implication that you are then cosmically alone and lost. I mean, like, Christians will call people who aren't faithful lost, right? And you're a sinner. You're evil for this, actually. You're not just lost and alone. You're, like, damned. And I think you can be more dramatic about this dichotomy, because non-belief in the face of something like this is an extremely dramatic choice, as we can see. It's damnation versus salvation, sinner versus saint, lost versus being one with everything, having a place, being found, alone versus togetherness, not only in the community of like the actual religion and practice, but also a cosmic solitude, right? When God is everything, according to Christianity, and you say no, you have turned your back on everything. And maybe my fundamental thing is that I don't feel like you capture the scale of the drama. This poem feels small, I guess. Not in length, but in scope. And you hint at these big ideas, his under his unseeing stare, which is the sky, you know. Every time I do something, this is always the weight of your sins. But, you know, am I wrong for simply wanting to be? I just want to be. I just want to be not there. I want to be myself. I want to be left alone from this. It feels very meek, maybe. And I guess my issue with that is your first line is, I'm not religious, but I can feel the weight of my sins. You say, I reject this. Your first line is telling us, I reject this, I'm going to be alone, and yet I still feel the sinful nature of what all of this tells me, right? You state that you sort of feel this dichotomy, this battle, this drama. But I don't think you really dig into, like, so much of the pain. You don't make me, like, you know, tearing up grass in the front lawn. I think this is one of the best lines. It stuck out to me. I said it stuck out to me, and now I think I know why. Because this is dramatic. This is you showing that you're doing this action of just confusion and an outburst of suffering underneath this God. Which makes me love this line. Right? But, like, there's only one line like it. That makes sense. To be fair, I grew up with religion around me, but never allowed presence in my home. I didn't deal with it on a personal level. I dealt with others dealing with it and felt guilty as a child that I wasn't going through that. Interesting. So it's almost like as to say, you know, this is a thing. But you didn't quite experience it, but you still understand. It's like removed, detached from that, maybe? And in that case, I do think you can work with the poem in that regard. We can work in that direction. Removed is a good word. So let's say we're sort of removed from the idea of God. We still intellectually understand what people are talking about, but we don't have this spiritual turning away, this whole dramatic thing. Right? Then I think we want to lean into that idea. And you have these lines. Let's talk about some different lines then. For simply wanting to be. This idea of like, I want to be removed from this, I just want to be here alone, that's fine. Right? I feel the need to break that gaze. Right? I think that's a good depiction. I don't want God looking at me. I just don't want it here. And if that is your objective, it makes me wonder about the effectiveness of a line like, to rebel, to light fire to skin against God. Because this then feels like that dramatic, helpless struggle, fighting. Have a good stream, Jin. Have a good one, Nico. This feels like struggle and very direct. That you are like grappling with God in a very immediate and connected way. Right? And maybe the answer is in what we talked about earlier. These people, right? Because really your interactions aren't with God. Your interactions are with the people who are reflections of God. Right? And maybe you can use that as to say that they are more the way you experience God in the world, and his maybe omnipresence is through them and their expectations, and that they want more, and you still want to be left alone by God through them. But this idea definitely contributes to your idea of the sort of detachment or, what did I say? Removed nature from God. Right? I think that will help you bring out a lot of the emotion that you're trying to express, because zeroing in on the idea of being removed, feeling guilty that you are, and that, you know, other people struggle with this. I think really leaning into these ideas, right? Instead of a poem that feels almost, general, talking about religious suffering. You know, show me scenes, show me you, right? And I think some of the most insightful lines are like, I just want to be. Like, that line feels very honest for simply wanting to be. The idea of not being wanted, of not being connected, of not having a guide, of disappointing people, of people wanting more, this feels like the most honest part of the poem, and the part of the poem that connects me most to you. And all of this, you know, it's dramatic. There's some beautiful poetry. The tearing up the grass, the lighting fire to skin, the breaking the gaze. All of these are like good lines. They're good poetry. I'm just not sure if these, one, contribute to the idea of his love being made for others, and this distance that you feel from the idea of God. Does that make sense? Maybe? Like, maybe the poem isn't focusing on what you might want? You think so? I'm not sure. Okay. So, here's how I'll say it. A lot of the things in this poem feel like they are expressing a very dramatic and pained personal relationship with God. Maybe I need to focus on my own experiences instead of trying to relate to others. Not exactly. I think the way you write this, right, this feels like your personal, direct relationship with divinity, and that it is painful, right? And that might be sort of a way that you are relating to others by, like, writing about this. But it mostly feels like you talking from experience about a very pained, a very troubled relationship directly with religion, right? I'm not religious, but I can feel the weight of my sins. His eyes on me, right? All of this feels very like me and God in your poem. And then you say, like, I want to turn away. I want to rebel. I want to light fire to his skin, but it will do nothing to God. And perhaps I don't think there's a problem with relating to others, but if what you are trying to express is a distance, if what you are trying to express is a relation to others and their relationship to God, I don't think the answer is writing with a direct relation to God, right? Good Lord, this critique is so good. And this poem is so personal and so good. Yes, it is so good. And I just typed out mine, like, haha, silly, sad narrator. That's funny. I appreciate that you like the critique, and you're finding value. And yes, the poem is excellent. The poem is very personal, but I'm not sure it communicates exactly what you're trying to communicate, Drowning Devil. And maybe I just have the wrong read on my interpretation, right? I'm a fan of making my poems have silly, sad, silly narrators. Yeah, absolutely. And I guess here's the thing, Drowning Devil. If this poem is with the narrator, right? Because the narrator doesn't have to be the poet. You don't have to be, this doesn't have to be you, I'm not religious. This could be someone else and their struggle with God. And that's definitely like a way to do it. However, I think if someone has a very personal struggle with God, if this is looking as a way to relate to someone else, I do maybe think, as someone who has had more direct struggle, I wasn't raised Christian, but I went to Christian schools. I know a lot about Christianity, and I've directly known people who have, turned away from extremely Christian places to be themselves, right? And I think a turning away from God looks even more violent and dramatic than what you have expressed. So I guess maybe my issue is that it lands somewhere in the middle, and I want either more drama, more violence, and more pain in this turning away from God, or it should lean into this idea of the meek wanting to be, I'm distant, which feels like you're doing two things that kind of clash. I just want to be, and I want to rebel and light fire to skin feel very antithetical. Right? I am the unwanted child left to do as I please, and yet I always feel their eyes on me. These things feel slightly clashing. And part of that is the tension, right? You lay it out at the start, I'm not religious, but I can feel the weight of my sins. Like, that might be exactly what you're going for. Having this complete contradiction of being an unwanted child who God looks at and wants and judges, and not being religious but having the weight of sin, and rebelling but wanting to just be left alone and turn away. And in that case, then you do a good job, right? And if that's my interpretation, like, maybe that's the right interpretation of the poem. And saying it out loud makes me like this poem for that a lot. I mean, I already liked the poem a lot, right? But let's say we look at this as grappling with all of the internal messy contradictions of not believing amongst belief. How do you come up with one line that I want to use? Rework this. When I was a kid, someone came up holding a binder. He asked if this was a Bible, would you open it? I told him I'd burn it. This happened the day after my mom taught me how to pray. Yeah, that's a really, really cool line, Drowning Devil. When I was a kid, someone came up to me holding a binder. He asked if this was a Bible, would you open it? Told him I'd burn it. That's a genuine story. The day after you were taught to pray. So this was like immediate. You're like, miss me with this God shit. And maybe let's turn that. You say you wanted to use it, but you need to rework it, right? So there are a few things that like make it feel kind of clunky as just writing. When I was a kid, someone came up to me holding a binder. This is like very slow to get to the point. It's not very descriptive. The point is, someone asked me, if this was a Bible, would you open it? And you said I would burn it. So maybe I personally would turn that into a poem by starting with a line. If this was a Bible, if this was a Bible, the maybe blank, give some description, asked. Make this part poetic. Say something about, their eyes or something. Would you open it? Right? That could be a way to do it. You could also get rid of even this, right? If this was a Bible, would you open it? Cut this and just say, I would burn it. You can go back and describe the situation. You can even say, if this was a Bible, would you open it? I would burn it. Whatever. Like, that gets to the point. And then, you can talk about this person. I don't know if it's a boy or a girl or a man or a woman, but then you can talk about the shock on their face. You can talk about then they clutched the binder close to them as if protecting something holy. You can show us how that completely subverted maybe their expectation of what they wanted you to say, right? Because you talk about expectations. People expect more, right? And show how that person felt. Or you can ignore it, because you can just say, I would burn it, in quotes. And then you could say something like, if you still feel that way, I still would. And I wouldn't think twice. Make it feel very casual. Ignore that person in your poem and show that their idea of God doesn't matter to you, that you're detached from it. That's one way to do it. You don't engage with this person beyond the question, and I would burn it. And then you go and talk about your thoughts on religion. Like, that is such a cool story, or such a dramatic story to make a poem out of. And I think there's like so much opportunity there to make something like really, really powerful, right? It's just a matter of putting in the right thing. And sometimes we have our own stories and we're like, okay, this happened and this happened. The boy came up, he had a binder. This is where Bukowski would go like, da da da, yeah, the boy came up, he had a binder, da da da, he asked me a question, da da da, and I said I'd burn the thing, right? Or you can make a poem out of it, right? And since it's our own memories, sometimes if we can visualize, you can see that in your head. You know everything, every detail of that moment that you remember. But if you want me to feel that moment as powerfully as you do, you need to describe it in a way that makes me feel every emotion in that scene, right? And I would highly recommend it, because that is a scene that is so... You have these two contradictory forces. We talked about dichotomies recently, like, you know, and such a dramatic thing to say. And then this happened the day after my mom taught me to pray. Like, that might be my favorite. Like, that addition is so cool to this story. You could start with the day after I was taught to pray. He asked if this was a Bible. The day after my mom taught me to pray, the man asked, so like separate, showing it's a different scene, it's not the mom, if this was a Bible, would you open it? That could be a title. The day after mom taught me how to pray. That would be a brilliant poem. And then that is the opening of your understanding of, yeah, I would burn this Bible, I reject religion, I am taking my own path here. Right? That's cool. Like, now we're cooking. You're cooking, Drowning Devil. I love that title. And and you can definitely include some of these ideas here. You know, I don't want to be watched by this God. I don't want to talk and pray. I want to burn the book, right? That's a cool direction. And you can definitely, like, I like this poem. There's nothing like, you know, sometimes the poems that I critique most are some of the better ones, because they give you more space and more opportunity to like dig into the little things. This specifically, like the tone and the way tension is used. But so you could either like take this poem, repurpose it into the day after my mom taught me how to pray, or you could write a whole new poem. Doesn't really matter to me, but I think you're on an idea now, and I think you're on an idea really good, and I would encourage you to not let that one go, because that seems like a cool poem, right? And You'll definitely write it then. Go for it, yeah. And I'd love to see it. So, that being said, I guess, do you have any other questions about this poem? And does anyone have comments from chat? I guess that's really just Jeffrey about said poem. And if not, I'll do one more final read to enjoy it and read over it and appreciate this poem. I feel it's really soft in a way. I enjoy it. That's interesting. I think I agree with the idea of that softness. Yeah. What about it, my name is Jeffrey, makes it soft? And I'm gonna run a quick ad because I feel like we might end up talking about softness and ways of describing things for a bit. And I want to run this ad so I can drink some water and turn off pre-rolls and all that stuff. But you also have access to chat during ads, so you can type it up. What makes it feel soft? I'm like eating takeout noodles on the couch rotting away. Let me fire up my answer a little. Yeah. That's why I'm taking a little break. That's a fascinating thing to say about a poem. And because of that, I want to encourage you to look at why does this poem feel soft? Let me suss that out, right? Hi, Harper. Good boy. Can I have shark? I heard he's soup to pickle. So, sounds like we've got an answer. Me back. Okay. Welcome back. And we are wondering why. That's always a thing. Drowning Devil. Or any poet. Whenever you get responses, whenever you get feedback, and someone says something like, it feels like this. I like this part. Your first inclination should be to ask, why? Why does it feel that way? Why? Tell me. Okay. I think it's soft because it's really gently written in a way. There aren't stark contrasts in the way that make the reader jump a little. It's really smooth and quiet and flowing, as much as it has a strong message. Yeah, and I think that's absolutely right, and that's probably a good description of what I was feeling. And with my personal relation to religion often being not soft, I think it sort of caught me off guard, right? Yes, Blahai. Her name is Maria. Because, you could talk about these dramatic, overwhelming things, but I think this poem does kind of want to be read in a softer, more resigned, more leave me alone kind of way. Like, his love was made for others. I'm not religious, but I can feel the weight of my sins. I don't believe in God, but I can feel his eye on me every time I do something wrong. I feel his judgment, his clouded gaze. I feel the need to break, to rebel, light fire to skin, but it will do nothing to him in the end. He's a god. And I am merely a husk of what was. I tear up grass in the front lawn under his unseeing stare. I am the unwanted child, left to do as they please, but with no guide. All I do is disappoint. People want for more, they expect more, but I was given no manual. How could they expect so much of me? Am I in the wrong for simply wanting to be? And that comment, Jeffrey, makes me realize every time, Drowning Devil, every time you start to say something that feels like it's going to be powerful, not powerful, this is powerful, every time you intense and like with a ton of an outburst, to rebel, to light fire to skin, this feels like, moving toward a really like big moment. And then you just say, but no, it will do nothing. He's a god. I tear up grass in the front lawn. I make this dramatic spectacle of myself. Under what? Under his unseeing stare. Doesn't matter what I do down here on Earth. That's all. And you even use repetition here, which we know can give this feeling of increasing intensity, because you never want your repetition to be just the same. You want movement through repetition, right? People want for more. They expect more, but, right, before we can, get into this point of an outburst against these people, we drop back down. But I was given no manual. How could they expect? You immediately sort of rebuke in a very calm way every time any sort of overwhelming emotion. And it's these devices, right, that give the feeling of softness. Right? It's like even saying something like, I'm not religious. It's a claim about this. But we sort of reel back any empowerment from a claim like that by saying, but I feel the weight of my sins still. I don't believe in God, but I can feel his eye. Like, every time something really intense could happen, every time we could go into a direction, you bring us back. And maybe that's why I felt this poem wanted to have this big dichotomous tension, and I might have just misread the softness in saying, I'm not going to let this be a giant outburst. And Jeffrey, putting it in that way, saying the poem is soft, really gives me an appreciation for this. I think that makes this a super cool poem. Like, I didn't realize that. And even then, like, his love was made for others. Like, it's not for me. There's this love. It's not mine. This really says his love is almost a statement. Like, there is love, but it was made for others. And Every time I do something wrong, I feel his judgment. His clouded gaze, I feel the need to break. To rebel, to light fire, to skin. Again, repetition, and then pull it back. But I can't do anything. And the way that this poem says that's okay, I just want to be. In a way, I critiqued the poem and said, at first, you're wrong for simply wanting to be. I sort of inadvertently said that by saying, give this poem more drama, make it more of a thing. I don't want you to just want to be. I want it to be this divine battle of man and faith and heaven. But also, the poem tells us that that's not what this poem is. I just want to be, right? So given that, that changes the way I see this poem. So thanks, Jeffrey. I try to always, keep the mind open. And, even if I feel I've, set my idea of an interpretation right, we should always allow our interpretation to change. Because, it's a piece of art. It's a reflection of life and ourselves and all these things, and new context lets this reflect life in a new way. So, noticing your feeling, Jeffrey, and trying to take that and feel it myself, right? This changes how I see the poem. And that makes it super cool, right? Not that it wasn't super cool before, but it makes me realize, and then this makes sense, because you see this device. If I were to say, I think, to me, this is my right interpretation now, given what I know about analysis. This idea is reinforced throughout the poem, through the words you use, through the devices, through this constant pattern of repeating, and then acquiescing, in a sense, right? This is basically the whole poem, this pattern. I just want to be. That's a pretty cool thing. I have to head off. Feel free to finish the review. I was basically just wrapping up there. And I think I'm going to give it one last read. If you can stick around for 2 seconds. And then we'll move on. His Love Was Made for Others by drowningdevil12. I'm not religious, but I can feel the weight of my sins. I don't believe in God, but I can feel his eye on me. Every time I do something wrong, I feel his judgment. His clouded gaze, I feel the need to break. To rebel, to light fire, to skin, but it will do nothing to him in the end. He is a god. And I am merely a husk of what was. I tear up grass in the front lawn under his unseeing stare. I am the unwanted child, left to do as they please, but with no guide, all I do is disappoint. People want for more, they expect more, but I was given no manual. How could they expect so much of me? Am I wrong for simply wanting to be? His Love Was Made for Others by drowningdevil12. Good work. Thank you for submitting. Thank you for watching. I encourage you to check out the rest of the series, follow if you enjoyed, and stop by Twitch if you want to share your own work. See you there.